the most violent thing an empath can do to you is nothing at all. No confrontation, no explanation, no final words, just absence. And if you've ever experienced this silence, you know it's louder than any scream. There's a moment that happens in complete stillness. One day you're in their life, woven into their daily thoughts, part of their emotional landscape. The next day, you've been erased. Not blocked with anger, not avoided with resentment. Something far more terrifying. You've been psychologically deleted as if you never existed at all. And if you're watching this, you're searching for answers to a specific kind of silence. You've either done this to someone, or someone has done this to you, and you're still trying to understand what happened in that invisible moment when everything changed. The empath didn't leave because they stopped caring. They left because they finally started caring about themselves. And what lies beneath this process, what drives it at the deepest levels of human psychology, will completely reframe every ending you've ever experienced. Because here's what most people miss. They think the empath walked away in pain and hurt in some emotional breakdown. But the truth is far more unsettling. The empath who deletes you isn't suffering. They're free. They've crossed a threshold that most people never reach in their entire lives. They've chosen themselves over the relationship, wholeness over connection, truth over comfort. And the most terrifying part, they're not looking back. Society has conditioned us to believe that empaths are soft, endlessly forgiving, infinitely patient. That they'll always give one more chance. That their capacity for understanding has no bottom. And for a long time, that's exactly what happens. The empath absorbs your pain. They excuse your behavior. They reframe your cruelty as woundedness. They carry the emotional weight of the entire relationship, while you remain completely unconscious of what they're bearing. But there's a specific moment invisible to everyone else, when something fundamental shifts inside them. There's a principle in psychology, one that explains why the gentlest people sometimes make the most brutal exits. It's the principle that everything, when pushed to its extreme, eventually becomes its opposite. The person who gave endlessly suddenly has nothing left to give. The one who stayed through everything suddenly walks away from everything. And the most disturbing part, they don't do it with hatred. They don't do it with vengeance. They do it with clarity. This is what makes the deletion so psychologically devastating. It's not an emotional decision. It's an ontological one. They're not deciding they don't like you anymore. They're deciding you no longer exist in their reality. You've been moved from the category of person to the category of lesson. From relationship to cautionary tale. From someone they loved to someone they survived. Think about what this means at the deepest level. In their internal world, in the landscape of their psyche, you've been reclassified. You're no longer in the present tense. You're in the past tense. You're no longer a living presence in their consciousness. You're a closed chapter, a completed story, a finished lesson. And this reclassification happens not through force of will, but through a fundamental shift in perception. It's like when you suddenly see the hidden image in an optical illusion. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. Once the empath sees the truth of who you are, the truth of what the relationship actually was, beneath all their hopes and projections, they can't unknow it. The veil has been lifted, and there's no putting it back. This happens because the empath has done something most people never do. They've looked directly at the part of themselves that enabled your behavior, the part that made excuses for your unconsciousness, the part that prioritized your comfort over their own dignity. And they've made a decision that changes the entire structure of their inner world. They've decided that their empathy is sacred, and you profaned it. Now, understanding this process requires understanding something fundamental about how the psyche actually works. The psyche has a natural immune system. When a foreign body repeatedly attacks the organism, the immune system doesn't keep trying to understand it. It doesn't keep giving it chances. It builds antibodies. It learns to recognize the threat. And eventually, it eliminates it without conscious thought. This is what happens inside the Carl Jung empath when they delete you. You've been recognized as toxic to their system, and the most sophisticated part of their consciousness has quarantined you, not with anger which would keep you alive in their psyche, not with resentment which would maintain the energetic connection, but with something far more final. Indifference born of understanding. They understand exactly who you are. They understand exactly what you did. And they understand that no amount of empathy, no amount of patience, no amount of hoping will change you. So they've done the only rational thing. They've removed you from their reality. Before we go deeper into this psychological phenomenon that most people will never understand, I need you to do something. Subscribe to this channel if you're someone who wants to go beyond surface explanations and into the real mechanics of human transformation. Your support helps this message reach other souls who need to understand why the gentlest people sometimes make the most brutal exits. Drop a comment right now. Just one word. Erased if someone has deleted you. Eraser if you've had to delete someone. Because what we're about to explore isn't just theory. It's the lived experience of anyone who's ever had to choose themselves over someone they once loved. Here's what you need to understand about how this process actually unfolds. The deletion doesn't happen in a moment. It happens across 1,000 invisible moments that the other person never noticed. The empath gives you warning signs that most people completely miss. They become quieter around you. Not because they're angry, not because they're withdrawing, but because they're observing. They're watching to see if you'll notice the shift, if you'll ask what's wrong, if you'll demonstrate any capacity for awareness beyond your own needs. This is the testing phase, though the empath isn't consciously aware they're testing you. Their psyche is gathering data. Every time you dismiss their feelings, that's a data point. Every time you make them responsible for your emotions, data point. Every time you take their empathy for granted, expecting them to understand you while making no effort to understand them, data point. And somewhere deep in their unconscious, a threshold is being approached. What's happening here is the accumulation of what we call shadow material. You keep depositing your unconsciousness into their psyche, expecting them to process it, for you transform it, hand it back to you in manageable pieces. And they do this over and over until the day they don't. Because the unconscious is always preparing what consciousness will later decide. Long before the empath consciously thinks about leaving their psyche, has been building the case, collecting evidence, recognizing patterns, and moving them slowly but inevitably toward the moment of departure. The actual moment of deletion is often triggered by something small. This confuses people. They think, but it was just a minor thing. Why did they completely cut me off over something so trivial? What they don't understand is that it wasn't about that final incident. It was about the totality of the pattern finally becoming undeniable. Think of it like a cup filling drop by drop. Each dismissal, each boundary violation, each moment of emotional labor taken for granted, another drop. The cup looks fine. It's holding the water. Everything seems normal. Until that one final drop that causes the overflow. And suddenly, everything spills. The person watching sees only that last drop and thinks that's what caused it. But the empath knows the truth. It was every single drop that came before. And here's what makes this process so insidious. You probably never saw the cup filling. The empath was so good at containing it, at managing it, at processing your unconsciousness for you, that you genuinely believed everything was fine. You thought their silence meant acceptance. You thought their patience meant approval. You thought their ability to handle your emotions meant they enjoyed handling them. But the whole time the cup was filling. The threshold was approaching. The psyche was preparing for what the conscious mind hadn't yet decided. And you remained completely unaware that anything was wrong until the moment it was already over. This is where human psychology reveals something profound about how we process repeated harm. We don't experience each incident in isolation. We experience them cumulatively. The psyche is building what's called a complex and emotionally charged cluster of associations. Every time a similar pattern occurs, it activates this complex, adding energy to it, making it stronger. And when a complex reaches a certain threshold of energy, it begins to take on a life of its own. It starts making decisions for us. The empath's consciousness might still want to give you another chance, but the complex, the accumulated energy of all those moments of harm has other plans. The self, that deeper organizing intelligence within the psyche, overrides the ego's need to maintain the relationship, because the self has one primary objective: survival and growth of the integrated personality. And it recognizes what the conscious mind refuses to see. This relationship is preventing growth. This connection is fragmenting the psyche rather than integrating it. This person is an obstacle to wholeness. So the self begins to withdraw libido psychological energy from that relationship. The empath stops thinking about you as much, stops wondering what you're doing, stops replaying conversations trying to understand your behavior. This isn't conscious. This isn't a decision they're making. This is their deeper wisdom redirecting energy away from what damages and toward what heals. And this brings us to something crucial about the Carl Jung empath that most people misunderstand. The empath wasn't just being kind to you. They weren't just being patient. They were unconsciously avoiding their own wholeness by becoming your psychological parent. They were giving to you what they refused to give to themselves: care, attention, understanding, boundaries. Their overgiving was actually a form of self-abandonment. And somewhere in their unconscious, they knew it. The shadow they were avoiding wasn't just about you. It was about their own need to be needed, their own fear of their own power, their own addiction to being the good one, the understanding one, the one who never gives up on anyone. Until they gave up on that version of themselves. Because here's what happens in that moment of awakening. The empath stops seeing you through the lens of who you could become. They start seeing you exactly as you are. The projection withdraws, the fantasy dies, and reality in all its uncomfortable clarity appears. You're not going to change. The pattern isn't temporary. This is who you are. And no amount of empathy, patience, or hope will alter that fundamental truth. This is the death of fantasy, and it's brutal. Not for you, but for them. Because they have to grieve not just the relationship, but their own illusions. They have to admit that they were wrong about you, that they invested years in a potential that was never real, that they loved a version of you that existed only in their imagination. There's a specific kind of grief that comes with this awakening. It's not the grief of losing someone. It's the grief of realizing you never actually had them. You were in love with your projection. You were committed to a fantasy. You were giving everything to someone who was never really there. And this grief is compounded by another realization. All that time, all that energy, all that emotional labor, it wasn't just wasted on you. It was stolen from themselves, and while they were busy trying to help you grow, they were neglecting their own growth. While they were processing your emotions, they were ignoring their own. While they were making space for you to be unconscious, they were abandoning their own consciousness. The awakening isn't just about seeing you clearly. It's about seeing themselves clearly, seeing how they participated in their own diminishment, how they enabled the very behavior that was destroying them, how they made themselves small so you could remain comfortable in your unconsciousness. And in that grief, something transforms. They realize they weren't seeing you at all. They were seeing their own projection, their own anima or animus, the inner masculine or feminine, cast onto your face. And when that projection withdraws, when they finally see you without the filter of their own hopes, they realize something that changes everything. You're a stranger. You've always been a stranger. And they've been in a relationship with their own imagination. This is why the deletion feels so complete, so surgical, so cold. It's not cold, it's clear. The fog has lifted. The fantasy has died. And what remains is simply the truth. You are not capable of the relationship they need. You are not willing to do the work required. You are not conscious enough to meet them where they are. And they're no longer willing to shrink themselves to meet you where you are. But why does this process feel so final? Why don't they give you space and come back when they've cooled down? Why does it feel like they've built a wall so high you could never climb it? Because it's not a wall, it's a boundary. And understanding the difference will change everything you think you know about what just happened. What drives the finality of the deletion isn't anger. Anger would keep you alive in their psyche, keep the connection active, keep the possibility of return open. What drives it is something far more powerful. The self taking over. Let me explain what this means. In depth psychology, there's a distinction between the ego and the self. The ego is your conscious identity, your sense of I, your everyday mind that makes decisions and navigates the world. But the self is something larger. It's the totality of the psyche, conscious and unconscious. It's the organizing principle that moves you toward wholeness, whether your ego wants it or not. And the self has one primary job: to protect and promote your individuation, your becoming of who you actually are, not who others need you to be. When a relationship consistently undermines this process, when it fragments you rather than integrates you, when it demands you abandon yourself to maintain connection, the self intervenes. And when the self takes over, the ego's preferences become irrelevant. The empath's conscious mind might have wanted to stay, might have wanted to give you another chance, might have hoped things would change. But the self recognized what the ego refused to see. This relationship was preventing their individuation. This connection was toxic to their growth. This person had to be removed for wholeness to occur. So the self did what the ego couldn't. It withdrew libido, that vital psychological energy, from you and the relationship. And here's what's crucial to understand. This withdrawal isn't forced. It's not the empath sitting there trying not to think about you. It's natural, organic. The way a plant turns toward light and away from darkness. The energy that was hemorrhaging outward, spent on trying to understand you, fix you, accommodate you, that energy returns inward. And the empath uses it to build a life that actually reflects their values. They become more selective about who has access to them, more attuned to red flags they used to ignore, more willing to disappoint others if it means honoring themselves. And here's the psychological sophistication of what's happening. They're not running from you. They're running toward themselves. This distinction is everything. Someone who leaves out of anger is still energetically bound to you. Their anger is a cord connecting them to you. Someone who leaves out of fear is still controlled by you. Their fear keeps you alive in their psyche. But someone who leaves because they've chosen themselves, because their self demanded it, because wholeness became more important than connection, they've broken the energetic cord completely. You no longer have the power to hurt them because you no longer have access to them, not to their thoughts, not to their emotions, not to their energy. You've been psychologically quarantined, and the most sophisticated part of their consciousness is protecting that boundary without conscious effort. This is the psyche's immune system at work. You've been recognized as a pathogen, and the organism has built antibodies, not through hatred, through wisdom. And here's something crucial to understand about this immune response. It's not personal. It's not vindictive. It's biological in a psychological sense. The organism protects itself because that's what organisms do. The psyche eliminates threats to its integrity because that's what healthy psyches do. The self removes obstacles to individuation because that's the self's primary function. You're not being punished. You're being recognized for what you are. And what you are in relation to their growth is an obstacle. Not because you're evil, not because you're worthless, but because you're unconscious. And unconsciousness, when it's chronic and unchanging, becomes toxic to those who are trying to become conscious. This is one of the hardest truths in all of human psychology. You can be a good person with good intentions and still be toxic to someone's growth. You can love someone genuinely and still be wrong for them. You can try your best and still cause harm, because impact matters more than intention. And the impact you had on their psyche, no matter how unintentional, was destructive. But the deletion isn't just about removing you. It's about the empath finally doing the shadow work they've been avoiding. And this is where the real transformation happens. The shadow, everything we refuse to see about ourselves, becomes visible in our closest relationships. And for the empath, their shadow had been hiding in their empathy. They thought their endless giving was love. But it was actually a sophisticated form of self-abandonment. They thought their patience was strength, but it was actually fear of their own power. They thought their understanding was compassion, but it was actually avoidance of their own needs. The Carl Jung empath who deletes you has finally looked at their shadow. They've owned the part of themselves that enabled your behavior. They've admitted the uncomfortable truth that they taught you how to treat them by accepting the unacceptable. They stayed when they should have left. They gave when they should have withheld. They made excuses when they should have demanded accountability. And in owning this shadow, in integrating it, they've transformed. They're no longer the person who will sacrifice themselves for connection. They're no longer available for relationships that require them to shrink. They're no longer willing to be the emotional container for someone else's unconsciousness. This is where true compassion emerges. Not the false compassion that enables, not the toxic compassion that sacrifices self for other, but the real compassion that says, I love myself enough to refuse this, and I love you enough to stop preventing your growth by buffering you from the consequences of your behavior. Because here's what the deletion actually is, underneath all the pain and confusion. It's a gift, not to punish you, to free you. And this is where the depth of what's happening becomes clear. The empath isn't just leaving a relationship. They're performing a profound act of faith in the universe, in the psyche's inherent drive toward wholeness, in your capacity for growth, even when you're not demonstrating it. They're saying, I believe you have what it takes to figure this out. I believe your psyche will guide you toward consciousness if I stop interfering. I believe that the consequences of your actions are better teachers than my endless patience ever was. This is what makes the deletion an act of love, even though it feels like abandonment. They're trusting you enough to let you fail, to let you feel the full weight of what you've done, to let you sit in the discomfort of your own unconsciousness without rushing in to make it easier. Because as long as someone is managing your emotions for you, you'll never learn to manage them yourself. As long as someone is buffering you from consequences, you'll never change your behavior. As long as someone is making excuses for your unconsciousness, you'll never become conscious. As long as you're in a relationship with someone who will tolerate your unconscious behavior, you have no reason to become conscious. You're enabled, protected from the consequences of your actions, buffered from the reality of how you affect others. The empath who stays is actually preventing your growth. But the empath who leaves, they're handing you back your own psyche and saying this is yours to deal with. For the first time, you're forced to feel the full weight of your own emotional world without someone to manage it for you. This is terrifying. It's also the only path to real transformation. The psyche is self-regulating. It naturally moves toward balance, toward wholeness, toward consciousness. But this self-regulation only works when we're honest about what's actually happening. When we stop denying, stop deflecting, stop blaming. When we finally look at ourselves and say, I created this. My unconsciousness led to this ending. My refusal to see myself clearly cost me this relationship. That moment of admission, that's the beginning of real change. But most people never get there. Most people spend months, years, decades in denial about what the relationship really was. They remember the good moments, conveniently forgetting the patterns of harm. They tell themselves the empath was too sensitive, overreacted, didn't understand them, didn't give them enough chances. This is the ego defending itself against the truth. Because the truth would require them to look at themselves completely differently, to admit they took more than they gave, that they caused harm while believing they were loving, that their version of the relationship was a fantasy that protected them from seeing their own shadow. And most people aren't ready for that level of honesty. Meanwhile, the empath is going through their own process. And it's not easy just because they made the decision. There's grief, real grief. Not for the person you actually were, but for the person they hoped you could become. There's guilt. Did they give up too soon? Could they have tried harder? Should they have explained more, been more patient, given more time? And here's where the real work happens for them. They have to resist the urge to rescue you one more time, to explain themselves one more time, to make sure you understand one more time. Because all of those impulses come from the old pattern. The pattern that said their worth was tied to their ability to heal others. The pattern that said their empathy was only valuable if it fixed you. The pattern that said they were responsible for your growth. Breaking this pattern means sitting with the discomfort of letting you struggle without intervening. It means trusting that you're capable of your own growth, even if you're not demonstrating it. And it means accepting that your suffering is no longer their responsibility. This is the empath's graduation. From unconscious giver to conscious chooser. From martyr to integrated human. From someone who loved you to someone who loves themselves more. What happens after the deletion reveals everything about human psychology and the paths available to us when we're forced to face ourselves. The person who's been deleted usually goes through several predictable stages. First comes disbelief. They can't understand how someone who was so patient, so understanding, so willing to work through anything, suddenly has zero tolerance. They reach out, expecting the empath to respond, to explain, to give them another chance. And when they're met with silence, or worse, with a calm but impenetrable boundary, they move to the second stage. Anger. How dare the empath leave after everything we went through? After all I gave to the relationship, after all the good times we shared. This anger reveals everything about the fundamental misunderstanding. They genuinely believed they were giving equally. They truly think the relationship was balanced. They honestly cannot see the imbalance because they were consuming, not contributing. They were taking empathy as a given, not recognizing it as a gift. The empath's patience was misread as confirmation that everything was fine. Their ability to handle your emotions was mistaken for enjoyment of handling them. Their willingness to stay was interpreted as proof that you weren't really causing harm. And now that they're gone, the anger comes from the shock of discovering that your version of the relationship was not shared reality. It was a delusion. The third stage is bargaining. Promises to change, apologies that sound sincere. I understand now. I see what I did wrong. If you just give me one more chance, I'll be different. And here's where the empath's resolve is tested. Because part of them, the part that still carries empathy, wants to believe the change is real. Wants to hope that this time will be different. Wants to give you the benefit of the doubt. But the self knows better. The self has seen this performance before. It knows the pattern. Big promises after big consequences. Temporary change when the stakes are high enough. And then slowly, inevitably, the return to old behaviors once security is reestablished. This is what's called repetition compulsion in human psychology. We're drawn back to familiar wounds until we heal them. The person who keeps ending up in relationships with takers hasn't healed their own relationship with giving. The person who keeps being abandoned hasn't healed their fear of abandonment. We repeat what we don't repair. And the empath who deletes you has broken their repetition compulsion. They've looked at the pattern of giving themselves away and said, this ends now. Not with you. Not with anyone. Never again. But here's where it gets interesting. Because the deletion creates a fork in the road. Two possible paths forward, and which path you choose determines everything about who you become. Path 1 is continued unconsciousness. You learn nothing from the deletion except that you need to find someone with weaker boundaries. Someone more tolerant. Someone who won't leave when things get hard. You tell yourself the empath was the problem. Too sensitive. Too demanding. Too unwilling to accept you as you are. And you find another empath. And you do it again. The same relationship in different bodies. The same conflicts with different faces. The same ending over and over until the pain becomes impossible to ignore. Or until you die having learned nothing, surrounded by a trail of people who tried to love you and gave up. This is the path most people take. Because it's easier. Because it doesn't require looking at yourself honestly. Because it allows you to remain the victim, the misunderstood, the one who just can't find the right person. And here's what's tragic about this path. It's not just that you keep losing relationships. It's that you keep losing yourself. Every time you refuse to look at your shadow, it grows stronger. Every time you blame someone else for leaving you, lose the opportunity to understand why they left. Every time you find someone new to repeat the pattern with, you move further away from the person you could become. You become a hollow version of yourself, going through the motions of connection without ever really connecting, saying the words of love without understanding what love actually requires. Moving from person to person, relationship to relationship, always searching for the one who will finally accept you exactly as you are. Never realizing that the problem isn't finding the right person. The problem is becoming the right person. But there's another path. Path 2, the awakening. This path requires you to ask yourself the most difficult questions you've ever asked. What did this relationship reveal about my shadow? What parts of myself was I projecting onto them, expecting them to carry for me? What wounds was I asking them to heal that are actually mine to heal? What behaviors was I engaging in that I've been unwilling to see these questions hurt? They strip away the comfortable narrative that you're fine and everyone else is the problem. They force you to admit that yes, you're capable of cruelty. Yes, you're capable of selfishness. Yes, you're capable of hurting people you claim to love. The shadow isn't healed by fighting it. It's not conquered. It's not destroyed. It's integrated, brought into consciousness, admitted, owned. Yes, this is part of me. Yes, I'm capable of this. Yes, I did this harm. The person who can make these admissions has a chance at real transformation. The person who can't will continue to leave a trail of damaged relationships behind them, never understanding why everyone eventually leaves, never seeing the common denominator in all their failed connections. Meanwhile, the empath is going through their own integration. And it's profound. All the energy that was going toward managing you, understanding you, excusing you, accommodating you, that energy returns to them. And they use it to build a life that actually reflects who they are, not who they had to become to maintain the relationship. This is what individuation actually means. Becoming who you actually are, rather than who others need you to be. The Carl Jung empath who deleted you has chosen individuation over relationship. They've decided that becoming whole is more important than keeping the peace. That their psyche matters more than your comfort. That their growth matters more than your feelings about their growth. This is a radical act in a culture that conditions empathic people, especially women, that their primary value is in their capacity to nurture others. That saying no is selfish. That boundaries are unkind. That leaving is failure. That they should keep trying, keep giving, keep sacrificing until there's nothing left of them. The empath who walks away has rejected all of these cultural narratives. And in doing so, they've freed themselves to become who they were always meant to be. They become more selective. Not cold, not closed off, but wise. They can feel deeply without confusing feeling with fixing. They can care about others without abandoning themselves in the process. They can offer empathy without offering themselves. The empathy is still there. It's just protected now. Protected by boundaries. Protected by wisdom. Protected by the hard-won knowledge that not everyone deserves access to their inner world. And something interesting happens. The life they build after you is often the most creative, most fulfilling period they've ever experienced. All that energy that was going into an impossible relationship now goes into building something real. They write. They create. They pursue goals they'd put on hold. They deepen friendships with people who actually reciprocate. They discover that peace isn't boring. Peace isn't empty. Peace is rich. It's full. It's what they were searching for all along in all the wrong places. This is what happens when you stop being a martyr and become a healer. Not someone who heals others while they're still bleeding, but someone who healed their own wounds first and now from that place of wholeness can offer genuine help to others. And the quality of their relationships transforms completely. They're no longer attracting people who need fixing. They're attracting people who are already whole, who are on their own path of individuation, who can meet them as equals rather than patients. Their friendships deepen. Their work becomes more meaningful. Their creativity flourishes. Everything in their life begins to reflect the inner wholeness they've achieved. There's a lightness to them now that wasn't there before. Not the lightness of denial or avoidance, but the lightness of someone who's put down a burden they were never meant to carry. They laugh more easily. They trust their own perceptions. They make decisions quickly because they're no longer second-guessing themselves or managing others' reactions. They've reclaimed the energy that was hemorrhaging into maintaining an impossible relationship, and that energy has transformed them. This is the evidence that the deletion was right. Not because you were wrong, but because they were losing themselves. And they chose to find themselves instead. Because here's the truth about the wounded healer archetype. You have to heal your own wounds before you can truly heal others. The empath who keeps trying to heal others while they're still bleeding isn't a healer. They're a martyr. And martyrdom isn't service. It's self-destruction disguised as virtue. The empath who deleted you stopped being a martyr and became an actual healer, which means they had to heal themselves first, which means they had to let you go. And this brings us to the question that haunts people who've been deleted. Did I ever really matter to them? Was any of it real? Did they ever actually care? The answer is more complex than yes or no. Yes, you mattered. The relationship mattered. The time spent together mattered. But not in the way you think. You mattered as a catalyst, as a teacher, as the person who showed them what they would no longer accept. The relationship mattered as the crucible in which they discovered their own strength. The time together mattered as preparation for the life they would build after you. This doesn't diminish what you shared. It contextualizes it. You weren't the destination. You were part of the journey. And the journey led them away from you and toward themselves. Years later, here's what actually happens. And this is where we see the real evidence of transformation, and the proof that the deletion wasn't just an emotional reaction, but a genuine shift in consciousness. The empath rarely thinks about you, not because they forced themselves to forget, not because they've worked hard to move on, but because you've become irrelevant to their daily experience. They've built a life so aligned with their values, so full of reciprocal relationships, so rich with meaning, that the old relationship feels like it happened to someone else. When they do think about you, it's with detachment. No charge, no emotion, just neutral observation. They can acknowledge what happened without emotional weight. They can see both the good and the bad without needing to justify their decision to leave. They can hold the complexity of having cared about someone who wasn't good for them. And most importantly, they can feel grateful for the lessons without wishing they were still in the classroom. Meanwhile, the person who was deleted often finds that this relationship, this ending, becomes a defining moment in their life. Not because the relationship was so special, but because the way it ended forced a confrontation with themselves that they've been avoiding. Either this is the moment they chose to remain unconscious, to blame the empath for being too sensitive, to continue the pattern with someone new, learning nothing, changing, nothing, remaining exactly who they were, or this is the moment they chose to wake up, to look at their behavior honestly, to do the work of integrating their shadow, to become the kind of person who can maintain a healthy relationship, to finally take responsibility for their impact on others. The empath can't make this choice for you. They already made their choice. They chose themselves. Now you have to choose who you're going to be. The person who learns nothing and repeats everything, or the person who uses this pain as fertilizer for growth. And here's what's interesting about this choice point. Most people don't make the decision consciously. They drift into one path or the other based on their willingness to feel discomfort. Path 1 is the path of avoiding discomfort. Blame the other person. Find someone new. Repeat the pattern. Never look at yourself too closely. Never sit with the uncomfortable questions. Never admit that maybe, just maybe, you were the common denominator in all these failed relationships. Path 2 is the path of embracing discomfort, sitting with the shame of recognizing how you've behaved, feeling the grief of relationships lost to your unconsciousness, admitting that you've hurt people you claimed to love, doing the brutal work of changing patterns that have been with you since childhood. This path is harder. It's lonelier. It requires more courage than most people possess, but it's the only path that leads anywhere real. The only path that breaks the cycle. The only path that transforms you into someone capable of the love you claim you want. For the empath, the deletion is their graduation. From old self to integrated self. From unconscious giver to conscious chooser. It was the line in the sand that said, "This is who I am now, and I will not return to who I was." They've completed a cycle of individuation. They're not the same person who entered that relationship. They've been transformed by the fire of choosing themselves. And they've discovered something profound. that they were never meant to be someone's savior. They were meant to be themselves. And that is more than enough. For the person who's been deleted, there are really only two possible endings. You continue the pattern, find another empath to consume, learn nothing, and die unconscious, surrounded by wreckage. Or you use this as the wake-up call it's meant to be. You investigate your shadow. You own your patterns. You do the excruciating work of becoming conscious. And here's the brutal compassion at the heart of this. The empath can't do this work for you. They tried. For months, years, maybe decades, they tried to help you see yourself. They held up mirror after mirror. Every time they expressed a need, you dismissed that was a mirror. Every time they set a boundary, you violated that was a mirror. Every time they asked for basic respect, and you made them feel unreasonable for asking, that was a mirror. They were showing you your shadow, and you looked away. Every single time. The deletion happened because they got tired of holding the mirror. They realized you had to choose to look at yourself. And they accepted that you might never make that choice. They accepted that they couldn't force your growth. They accepted that loving you didn't mean staying with you. And they walked away, not in hatred, but in the most profound act of self-love they'd ever committed. Understanding human psychology at this level changes how you see every relationship. Because here's what becomes clear. Every relationship is ultimately about the relationship you have with yourself. When you abandon yourself for someone else, you're not being loving. You're being unconscious. You're avoiding the terrifying work of building a self strong enough to exist without constant external validation. The empath who deleted you stopped avoiding that work. They faced the question that terrifies most people. Who am I when I'm not busy taking care of someone else? Who am I when I'm not defined by my usefulness to others? Who am I when I'm just me? And they discovered something that changed everything. They're not empty without you. They're full. They're complete. They're whole. This is the destination of individuation. Not needing others to complete you. Not requiring external validation to feel worthy. Not abandoning yourself to maintain connection. But standing in your own wholeness and inviting others to meet you there. Not demanding they shrink so you can feel big. Not requiring they carry your shadow. But showing up as your full self and accepting nothing less from them. The deletion isn't the end of the story. It's the beginning of the real one. So if you're the empath who's considering deleting someone right now, who's feeling the guilt, who's wondering if you're giving up too soon, if you're being too harsh, if you should give one more chance, listen carefully. You're not abandoning them. You're teaching them that actions have consequences. You're showing them that empathy has limits. You're modeling what self-respect actually looks like. And you're freeing yourself to build a life that doesn't require you to constantly sacrifice your peace for someone else's comfort. The guilt you feel. That's the old pattern trying to pull you back. That's the voice that says you're only valuable if you're giving. That's the lie that your empathy is only meaningful if it fixes other people. Feel the guilt. Honor it as the death of your old self. And choose yourself anyway. And if you're the person who's been deleted, who's reading the messages that will never get a response, who's trying to understand how someone who loved you could leave so completely, you have a choice right now. Right in this moment. You can spend the rest of your life telling yourself the empath was wrong, was cold, didn't understand you, didn't appreciate you, gave up too easily. You can find someone new to take their place and do it all over again, learning nothing changing, nothing dying exactly as unconscious as you are right now. Or you can use this as the awakening it's meant to be. You can look at what happened with ruthless honesty. You can ask yourself what you contributed to the ending. You can do the shadow work of integrating the parts of yourself you've been avoiding your entire life. You can become someone who doesn't get deleted. Someone who recognizes empathy as the gift it is and honors it accordingly. The moment of deletion is brutal because it's final. Because it forces both people to face truths they've been avoiding. Because it ends the fantasy and introduces reality. But it's also necessary. It's sacred. It's the line that says, I will not abandon myself for your comfort. I will not sacrifice my wholeness for your unconsciousness. I will not give you access to my inner world if you don't value it. One of the most profound insights in all of human psychology is this. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is become unavailable for someone else's unconsciousness. Not to punish them, but to free them and yourself to finally do the work of becoming whole. The deletion isn't an ending. It's an invitation to both people to finally become who they were always meant to be. For the empath, it's the invitation to stop being a martyr and become themselves. For the deleted, it's the invitation to stop being unconscious and become aware. Both invitations are sacred. Both require courage. Both lead to transformation, but only if you accept them. The question isn't whether the deletion was right or wrong. The question is, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to let it destroy you, or are you going to let it remake you? Are you going to stay in blame, or are you going to move into responsibility? Are you going to repeat the pattern, or are you going to break it? Everything that happens to us is raw material for transformation. The deletion is some of the richest raw material you'll ever receive. It's showing you exactly where you're unconscious, exactly what you need to heal, exactly who you need to become. The only question is whether you're brave enough to look. Because here's the final truth about all of this. The deletion happened the moment it needed to happen. Not too early, not too late. Exactly when the empath's psyche recognized that staying would mean abandoning themselves. Exactly when their self decided that wholeness mattered more than connection. Exactly when the accumulated weight of unconsciousness became too much for them to carry. You can argue with that timing. You can wish they'd given you more warning, more chances, more explanations. But the timing wasn't chosen by their ego. It was chosen by something deeper. By the wisdom of the psyche that knows what consciousness doesn't yet understand. By the self that protects individuation even when the ego wants to maintain connection. And that timing, that moment of deletion, was actually a gift to both of you. To them, it was freedom. To you, if you're willing to receive it, it's the wake-up call that could change everything. The question is whether you'll listen. If this resonated with you, if you've been the empath who had to leave, or the person searching for answers in the silence, share your story in the comments. Sometimes we need to know we're not alone in these brutal, sacred moments of transformation. Your comment helps this reach others who need to hear it. Subscribe so we can continue exploring the deep psychology of human connection and what it really means to choose ourselves. This is the work that changes lives. And it starts with understanding that the deletion wasn't the end. It was the invitation to finally become whole.